and welcome to another pen video from me, Penultimate Dave. So I have here another inks comparison video, and this is Bleu inks comparison number 8. So I think with that, let's go and swap up some of these inks. So I get a lot of questions on how I do these ink videos. So I decided I would add this to the front of each of the ink videos. I put links in the description, but I know some of you watch this on TVs or mobile devices, so you don't get to see this. So first off, the paper is the number one question I get asked. What paper do I use for these ink comparison videos? So this is the original Tomoe River. This is 52 GSM, and it is the white, not the cream, the white. Where possible, I try to go for the white because the cream can actually change the color of the ink just a little bit. So this is Tomoe River 52 GSM in the white. A lot of people get confused as well because I have what looks to be a grid on this page, and it's actually an Oxford Optik pad. These are the pads that I actually use when I'm writing my writing samples for pen reviews or in my currently ink. So they have these little squares up here. I just use that because it's a good guide for me. When I put this very thin sheet of Tomoe River over, I can actually see squares, so it helps me write a little bit sort of straight on the page. Not always, but sometimes it does. The other thing that I also have is I have a bottle of water, plain water, and I dip my nib in here. So for consistency, I use the same fountain pen, or I guess it's not a fountain pen, it's using a fountain pen nib though. This is a 3D printed pen from William Shakour in the UK. So he prints this material 3D, and it has a number 8 size Bock nib which I can unscrew, and you can see there. So it is just a dip pen holder for a number 8 size Bock nib, and the idea is I want to have consistency with the writing sample. So I use this, I dip it in the ink, I write, and then I will dip it in here and I will rinse the nib off several times and I will dry it, and then at that point I will then go on to do the next ink swatch and the next writing sample. So there you have it. That's how I do my ink swatches. So I just wanted to show you that here. Now on to the ink comparison video. So the first ink here in this inks comparison is Diamine, and it's China Blue. So I think we'll do an ink swatch. And this is an interesting blue. It's always a blue that I think isn't the colour of China. And when I say China, I mean sort of crockery, sort of cups and saucers. I'll do a second pass on the top half here, just show the difference between a wet and a broad, and a dry and a narrow writing nib. So this is Diamine, and it is China Blue. But saying that, sort of, it may not be a China Blue coloured ink that I recognise. I do think it's actually a really nice shade of blue. So for me, this is a blue ink that I have been using quite a bit lately. The next ink here is Diamine Asa Blue. So we'll do another ink swatch here. And again, this is a very nice blue, one that I've been using quite a bit. Now, initially it starts to go on a little bit like Diamine China Blue, but then it starts to lighten up. So we'll do a second pass here on the top half, show the difference between a wet or a broad and a dry and a narrow writing nib. So this is Diamine, and it is Asa Blue. But this is quite a nice blue ink, and I'm hoping you're going to see some sheen from this, because I just want to show you the rim of this bottle. You can see there that there is some beautiful, but be careful not to pour it out, beautiful red sheen going on around the rim of that bottle there. Now, talking of sheen, this one has actually sort of leaked out a little bit. I think it was another ink actually from Krishna. But this is Krishna Cool Breeze. So we'll do an ink swatch. And I have to say this is quite a nice colour. I'd say it's almost like a sky blue turquoisey coloured ink. We'll do a second pass on the top half just to show the difference between a wet and a broad and a dry and a narrow writing nib. Now this is Krishna and it is Cool Breeze. And actually, just now that I think about it, a nice light blue ink with a silver shimmer to it would also be a good name for Cool Breeze as well. Now, I did say that there was some ink that had leaked out onto the label here. You can see here again there is some red sheen around the rim of that bottle. So I'm hoping again we might see some red sheen there. The next ink here on this ink comparison is Diamine and it's Pelham Blue. And if you don't know, this is part of the Gibson Les Paul collection of guitar inks. So we'll do an ink swatch. And you can see there, again, it's quite a viscousy coloured ink. I'm going to do a second pass again over the top half just to show the difference between a wet and a broad and a dry and a narrow writing nib. I would say that this looks, I've not tried this ink before, so I would say that this looks a little bit more of a blue-black coloured ink. So this is Diamine and it is Pelham Blue. And we'll see how that ink dries. The next ink here I have labelled up because there isn't actually a label on the bottles, but this is clearly, get around the right way, Visconti, and it's Visconti Blue. So we'll do an ink swatch. Now, this is an interesting blue. I never used to like this blue from Visconti, and I have several bottles of it. It is a bit dry, a bit viscousy. Now, I'll do a second pass over the top half to show the difference between a wet and a broad and a dry and a narrow writing nib. But I do find that this is actually an interesting ink because it does have, if you see around the rim of that bottle, hopefully you'll see on camera, a slight red sheen to it. Not a lot, but a little bit of sheen. But this is an ink that I have used a lot in Viscontis. Partly because a lot of Viscontis come with this blue ink. If you have a pen in a box set. So this is Visconti Blue. But it is an ink that I've used a lot because I have, I think, 2 or 3 bottles of this now. And it really is a nice blue ink. And then the last ink here today is Herbin and it's Bleu Myosotis. And we'll do an ink swatch. Now, some of you may say, hey, look, this is not a blue ink. And the name Myosotis also is a little bit more of a purpley or lavender colour. But it is called blue. So I'm still going to include it in this blue ink comparison. We'll do a second pass over the top half, just to show the difference between a wet and a broad and a dry and a narrow writing nib. So this is Herbin. And it is Bleu Myosotis. So I think let's now take a look at these inks that they have dried a little bit more. So the first ink here is a Diamine China Blue, and I have to give it to Diamine that although I don't really perceive this as being the same colour as blue china in crockery, in cups and saucers, when it is dried, the dry version of blue china does actually look a little bit more closer to blue china ware. Now, you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. There is some shading going on in the pulled areas that you can see there. Now, it also has a little bit of sheen, and you can see the sheen around here, just around the edges of the pulled areas. Now, it is a slight red sheen to it. Not a huge amount. You don't see it on the writing sample, but it is a little bit of sheen there, so you might see some sheen. I think if you left this ink out in a pen for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then started to write with it, you're probably going to see some lovely red sheen in there, where the water has slightly evaporated out of the ink. The next ink here is Diamine Asa Blue, and I have to say that this is actually becoming a little bit more of a favourite blue for me. It is an interesting blue. You can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. There is some shading going on as well in the pulled area more. Is there any sheen going on? I want to say it's trying to sheen. It's just not quite being able to sheen. But that is a really nice blue ink. The writing sample in a wet nib does come out a lot more darker in blue. The next ink, which I have to say I am really liking, is Krishna Cool Breeze. Now, you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. There is shading going on in the pulled areas. Now, do a close-up here. Is there any sheen going on? I want to say it wants to sheen. And there was sheen around the rim of the bottle. But I'm not really seeing that sheen there. Maybe a little bit just around the edges of this round bit of pulled area. But not a huge amount of sheen. The next ink is a Diamine Pelham Blue, and I don't know, I was expecting something a little bit more on the lighter side of blue, because that's the colour blue that is on the label, but it's more, I would say, a blue black. Can you see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib? Yes, you definitely can. You can also see a little bit of shading going on. Not a massive amount, but a little bit of shading around that pulled area. And then, can you see any sheen? Yes, there is a little bit of red sheen around the pulled area edges there that you will see. It's not a huge amount though, and I'm not seeing it there in the writing sample either. But again, if you left it in a pen for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, and some water evaporates out of that ink and it becomes more viscousy, maybe you'll see a little bit more red sheen. The next ink here is Visconti Blue, and this has been quite a bit of my go-to blue. It's a little bit more of a, I want to say a blurple. It's not quite a blurple. It definitely has a more purplish tinge on the wetter area. So you can definitely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib. You can see shading in the pulled area. You can also see some sheen going on here. And I've seen this in a lot of writing samples in some of my Viscontis that write very wet. But you can see around the edges here, there is some red sheen going on. You don't see it in the writing sample here though, but I have had it in other writing samples. And then the last ink here is Herbin, and it's Bleu Myosotis. And yes, maybe it's not a blue, but it's more of a lavender kind of colour. It does have blue in the name, so I'm just including it because it does have blue in the name. You could hugely see the difference between a wet and a dry writing nib here. There isn't a huge amount of shading going on, I would say, in the wet pulled area there, and there certainly isn't in the dry writing area. Is there any sheen going on? I want to say it's trying to sheen in the pulled area, but it's just not able to do so. It certainly isn't sheening in the writing sample there. But this is an interesting colour, and it's a colour that I do like. I was after a replacement for another coloured ink a while back, and I decided to buy a couple bottles because it is a smaller bottle of ink, and I'm actually glad that I did buy it because I wanted a lavender coloured ink. So for me, it's great. Is it a blue ink? It's on the edge of blue. Maybe not what people would consider a sort of definitive blue ink. So there you have it. That's my blue inks comparison number 8 video. If there are any of these inks you like, do let me know in the comments below. Likewise, if there are any other blue inks you'd like me to check out, do let me know in the comments below. So that's my blue inks comparison number 8 video. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next pen video. Bye bye.